typical Google search will often yield misinterpreted facts and inaccurate falsehoods. When preparing true crime content, one should never rely solely upon Google search results for their presentations. One should make every attempt to verify, via review of official records, affidavits, and published interviews before presenting as facts. If verification cannot be achieved, one should refrain from publishing, or at the very least, include a disclaimer. In our experience, this is how major social troubles and fake news begin. True crime content, in our opinion, should always begin with a completely objective perspective. This ensures that it remains a truthful presentation. We must be responsible with our content publishing. Creators are so eager to become famous, get likes, and have followers. They often rush to publish hot subjects. In their haste, they neglect fact-checking and simply rely on what others have posted. This can lead to serious issues of truthful presentations, allowing injustices to prevail. We would like to examine one such case. For 30 years, the murder of Dana Satterfield has inspired countless vlogs, podcasts, and YouTube productions. People seem to be fascinated with true crime stories, but sadly, it's usually just the same story, just told by new people, with little to no fact-checking. Relying heavily on what came before is the source of research. The true tragedy is that when this cycle starts, it often grows until the facts are so far gone. All that remains is the shell of a story, and a host of misrepresented facts and inaccuracies that change a true crime story into a work of fiction. We would like to correct some of the misrepresented facts of the case by presenting never-before-seen facts, and we aim to do so in a way that ensures justice for Dana. Keep in mind that ensuring justice sometimes means examining hard truths and checking our emotions so that the perpetrator is correctly identified. We will begin with a brief synopsis of the generally accepted public narrative. In the rural community of Roebuck, South Carolina, the last day of July 1995 seemed like just another typical, lazy summer afternoon. The drifting sounds of children's laughter coming from no particular direction. The familiar smells of charcoal and burgers floating on the air. Such are the joys of small-town life. But, as the sun sets, darkness begins to gather, and for one local business owner, Dana Satterfield, this day would prove to be anything but typical. Her beauty salon, a converted mobile home, sat on the corner of Maccabee Road and Highway 221. It was a familiar place of comfort and style, known by locals for that good old-fashioned hospitality that the South is renowned for. But, by night's end, it will forever be known for something else entirely. Dana just finished her last appointment and was walking the customer to the door. They exchanged their goodbyes. Dana locked the door and began to clean the shop, then onto the arduous task of folding the day's laundry. At around 8:30 p.m., a door-to-door saleswoman from Charlotte, North Carolina, Diane Harris, was standing at the edge of the parking lot, waiting for her ride back home, when she heard a commotion, a flurry of violent, muffled thuds from inside the salon. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Then, a crashing from out a window of the shop. A shadow burst forth and bolted away. In that panicked, terrifying second, Diane locked eyes with the shadow, only it wasn't a shadow, it was a man. She ran for help thinking that Dana had just been robbed. As she rounded the liquor store in front of Dana's shop, from the opposite side appeared the man. They almost collided and were now face to face. He gave Diane a look that sent a cold shock down her spine. Without a thought, she fled, her scream trapped somewhere deep in her throat. Diane found help from a nearby mobile home, and the owner called the police.
Primary 911, what's your request?
I want to report somebody being robbed.
Okay, as far as the house being broke into, or?
No, the lady has a beauty shop right up here in front of us, but a man just broke in and robbed her.
Okay, he's still there?
As they said he was, somebody come running to our door, knocking on the door, telling us to call 911.
The first deputy arrived at around 8:50 p.m., Deputy J.T. Burnett. He entered the shop through the only door, and cautiously moved deeper into the darkened shop, gun drawn, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the gathering night. The air was heavy with the coppery smell of blood. An overwhelming sense of dread began to take hold of the deputy. There, in the back of the small restroom that doubled as a laundry room, his light found the cause of his dread. The semi-nude body of Dana Satterfield, bloodied and brutally beaten, was silently hanging from the hot water heater. He called out to her, the sound of his own voice weak against the rising sound of cicadas. There was no response, only the rhythmic hum of the insects. His breath caught in his throat. He slowly backed away, methodically retracing his steps, his training fighting against the wave of nausea growing in the pit of his stomach. Deputy Burnett notified dispatch of the discovery and requested additional units. Within minutes, multiple sheriff's officers and an EMS unit arrived. And then a few hours later, SLED agents, that's the South Carolina State Law Enforcement Division, arrived at the salon. They began processing the scene, gathering evidence, conducting interviews, and looking for any clues to help identify the perpetrator. With the help of Diane Harris, the eyewitness, a description was developed of the band seen jumping from the tiny 3-foot by 3-foot window, and a report by another witness, Ken Smith, who saw a possible suspect vehicle around the time of the murder. Numerous other leads, national media attention and features on unsolved mysteries, and the Montel Williams show. Countless hours investigating turned into weeks, then months, without any resolution. The case came to a frustrating dead end and went cold, leaving residents to believe it would never get solved. Nearly a decade later, a new witness came forward, David Michael Pace. He tells authorities a story about his friend from high school who went to see Dana on the night of the murder, and he intended to ask her out. His friend also drove a blue and white Ford Bronco with saw-blade rims. Based on this new information, a search warrant was obtained for his friend's DNA. A sample was collected and sent to agent Lily Gauman, an analyst with SLED, and using newly available technology, she was able to match the DNA sample from 1995 to a suspect, Jonathan Christian Vick, a 27-year-old man from Greenville, South Carolina. A former U.S. Marine, loving husband, and the father of a 3-week-old daughter. On October 24, 2005, Vick was arrested and officially charged with Dana's murder. 13 months later, on November 30, 2006, he was convicted by a jury trial. His conviction was primarily secured by the DNA evidence, reportedly to be a semen sample, with odds of random probability match of 1 in 900 million. The testimony from Pace, a jailhouse snitch, Stephen Allen Vaughn, Aaron Popkins, who purchased the Bronco from the Vick family in the early part of 1996, and the ex-girlfriend, Cora Kent. For the public, it seemed this cold case was finally closed. However, in the 13 months leading up to the trial, there were over 100 reported stories on Vick, both in printed news and broadcast articles that linked Vick to the disappearances of 2 local women, a former girlfriend, Heather Sellers, and a friend, Michelle Whitaker, were focused on by the media, and statements from Sheriff Chuck Wright and Prosecutor Gowdy were expertly crafted to manipulate the public and paint the disturbing picture of a serial offender. For the past 20 years, the infamy of Jonathan Vick has grown and taken on a mantle of an infallible conviction, and with the looming disappearances of the 2 other women being linked to Vick, organizations such as the Innocence Project will not even consider investigating Vick's conviction for fear of political backlash. The accusations of Sellers and Whitaker have added a layer of insulation for prosecutor Trey Gowdy's winning conviction. Something a seasoned politician knows well about: how to utilize the media for protecting invested interest. We wondered why so much of this story is completely one-sided. We began by researching why no one has ever spoken to Vick or his family. So we reached out to Vick, and he stated that all attempts to get the truth out seem to be thwarted. He stated that he's never even been questioned by authorities regarding the murder. We found this curious and decided to investigate this claim. Sure enough, no records of any attempt to question Vick exist. He maintains his claim of innocence and that corruption at multiple levels of law enforcement is why he's in prison. Again, it looks like he is telling the truth, As former sheriff of Spartanburg County, Chuck Wright has recently resigned and pled guilty to numerous felonies of fraud and corruption, with more charges forthcoming. This got us really curious, so we decided to look at the case from the other side, since Vick has emphatically claimed his innocence for 20 years. What if he's telling the truth about this as well? What we have uncovered is something even Hollywood couldn't have scripted. We will provide links to the documents presented in the comments section below. Feel free to examine them at your convenience. We also understand that this presentation will likely upset many people and see this as an insult to Dana's memory. However, we feel strongly that Dana's memory is better served by ensuring that the right person is serving time. So what follows is the facts that occurred after Vick's arrest, and then the possibility of an alternative theory that was either intentionally overlooked or done so because of sloppy police work. Either way, we encourage everyone to continue watching and to do so with an open mind. So, let's begin by separating facts from fiction. Let's begin with the easiest fiction. The ex-girlfriend Cora Kent never testified in Vick's trial, as the transcript clearly shows. So where did this fallacy come from? In the fall of 2000, Vick and Kent were involved in a custody dispute over their daughter. Kent had taken their daughter and disappeared. She contacted Vick after a few weeks and told him he could have their daughter for the week, then gave him the address she was staying in Inman, South Carolina. Vick and his sister drove to Inman, where they met Kent at the address. Kent secured their daughter in the car and told Vick that she would call Sunday and let him know where she would be for him to return the child. It was, however, a setup, as Kent had called the police moments before. Vick and his sister were only minutes from their home when the Spartanburg sheriffs pulled them over. Vick was arrested and charged with CDV. Kent claimed Vick took the child forcibly. She claimed Vick punched her in the right eye and dragged her across the ground. The reporting officer made note that he had arrived less than 5 minutes after the alleged incident. Kent had no marks or visible injuries. The CDV was dismissed when Kent confessed to the Honorable Judge Dover. She had made it all up in order to build evidence for the pending custody battle. Let's talk about Cameron Popkin's testimony now. His testimony is actually more significant than anyone truly realizes. Popkin testified that he bought the Bronco from the Vick family in 1996. He then testified under oath that the sheriff's department borrowed the Bronco to take pictures that were then used to create the wanted posters. Popkin continues to testify that his company printed those posters for the sheriff's department. The Bronco was the foundation evidence that was utilized to obtain search warrants for Vick. Because of this testimony that prosecutors made the decision not to call any of the detectives who worked the case. They could potentially be put in a position to commit perjury. The significance of his testimony, however, is very important, and defense attorneys either willingly dropped the ball or simply just failed because of severe incompetence. The Bronco was actually collected and processed and formally cleared by then Sheriff Bill Coffey as the suspect vehicle. There were serious discrepancies between the suspect vehicle and the Vick's Bronco. The two were the Vick's Bronco, which lacked the extended windshield visor, saw-blade rims, the dark blue top, and the lift kit. To put it into perspective so that this significance can be better understood, let's imagine that for years, the police are looking for a shotgun as the weapon of a crime. They find someone who has a pistol and cleared that suspect because a pistol is obviously not a shotgun. Then years later, return to that suspect and claim that the suspect owned a gun and a gun was used in the crime. Warrants and convictions based on this type of misconduct are significant beyond measure. Next, we will briefly discuss the jailhouse snitch testimony. Steve Allen Vaughn, a career criminal whose rap sheet is longer than a Tom Clancy novel. His predominant history is fraud and obtaining goods under false pretenses. This translates in layman's terms as basically a professional liar. There were several witnesses that claimed Vaughn was coached on his story while in jail. He was released from jail, and his probation violation charges were dropped immediately after offering to testify. His credibility is an obvious question. Jailhouse snitches are more often than not lying for favors in return. They always seem to appear in cases that are very questionable or highly circumstantial. This brings us to David Michael Pace, the star witness who cracked the case. Discussions with Vick yielded no insight on Pace, as Vick claims no recollection of who Pace is. So we did some research ourselves, and little can be found on Pace from the 90s. From what we can tell, Pace lied about attending Dorman High School. Records indicate in 1994 that he attended Chapman High School in Inman, South Carolina. There are reports that he experienced some sort of mental health crisis that year, and had to be hospitalized for a period. Also, Pace lied about meeting Vick on Farmer's Day 1994, when he stated he knew it was then because Vick was dressed up like a farmer. Used in the newspaper, was actually Farmer's Day 1995, and if you were merely confused about the dates, well, that still means his entire story about Vick going to Dana's is a lie. His Farmer's Day, 1995, was months after Dana's murder. We believe that Michael Pace is a liar and had a singular motivation, the $50,000 reward. After reviewing all the case documents, we were unable to locate any efforts or documented attempts by detectives to corroborate the truth of Pace. David Michael Pace was called to testify twice in the trial of Jonathan Vick, once by solicitor Gowdy and then, in a move we yet have been able to understand, he was called by defense counsel. Defense counsel was able to trip Pace up numerous times, and also was able to establish that Pace was lying several times. Full testimony is available in the links below. Lastly, we discuss Lily Gallman's testimony and the DNA evidence. Admittedly, we expected that this would conclusively prove Vick's guilt. However, after reviewing the evidence and discussions with several experts, we were convinced that Vick was, in fact, framed by law enforcement. As the DNA evidence presented at trial was not only mishandled but deliberately altered in order to achieve a match. Agent Gallman, using the ABI Prism Genotyper 3.7, manually edited the DNA call markers to target Mr. Vick's profile. Specifically, we will focus on the locus VWA and the reported results by Gallman. The DNA evidence is a mixture, that of Dana and that of one other. At the VWA locus, Dana has a marker of 18, and Vick has a 15 and an 18. In simple terms, Dana got an 18 from her mother and an 18 from her father, which is just reported by 18. Vick received a 15 from one parent and an 18 from the other. According to the raw data and chart of the Genotyper 3.7, there was another marker present. A 16 is seen on the highlighted chart. That 16 would couple with the 15, meaning that the suspect profile was actually 15 and 16 for the VWA locus. This conclusively excludes Jonathan Christian Vick as the donor but was intentionally concealed to implicate Vick. There are also a host of other misrepresented facts and inaccuracies regarding Gallman's findings and testimony. We have been asked not to list them all in this presentation, so that a potential appeal can address them. Sadly, as we have recently seen from the ongoing investigation of Colorado law enforcement's DNA laboratory, people in these positions have and continue to manipulate evidence to suit their own misguided ideas of justice. More detailed information regarding DNA evidence is provided in the links below. A summary of the case is fairly simple from this point. Sheriff's Department concealed the fact that Vick's Bronco is used as the photo example in the wanted posters. After they had to add the saw blade rims, a sun visor, and a lift kit, they were fully aware that the Bronco of the Vicks was not the vehicle sought. Instead, they continued to lie about Vick's Bronco matching. Pathologist examination confirmed no rape occurred. DNA swabs confirmed as well. The fingerprint in Dana's blood did not match Vick. The pubic hair recovered from the rape kit excluded Vick. Former Sheriff Wright and convicted felon repeatedly misled the public about Vick. Vaughn lied to get himself out of jail. Pace made up his story. No fingerprints at the crime scene belonged to Vick. The DNA evidence excluded Vick, but that fact was deliberately concealed. Vick never stood a chance with all the misconduct by prosecutors and sheriffs. This is what is known as a fundamental miscarriage of justice. Hopefully, Vick will get the relief he so deserves, and Dana can finally get the justice that law enforcement has denied her for 30 years. Thanks for watching. In our next video, we will discuss who the evidence actually implicates.